Let's go ahead and get into God's word. We're talking about tent to tomb. I'm going to play it out. So we don't have the video. I want you to visualize. We're going to go back to time before technology and really give some creativity. We're studying Revelation. You have to visualize what John is writing about. The same is true when I talk about the tent to tomb. And for some reason, some people have really struggled with this metaphor. And I don't mean you personally, I mean just collectively. We look at it and go, oh, the temple's Old Testament. We don't do that anymore. But if you don't appreciate how Jesus restructures our approach to God with the temple in mind and the elements of the temple, you really are missing a rich fact of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. So, I share with you to start, we are cast off the mountain that we were supposed to be in Eden. And Eden is believed, you can go to Ezekiel, Jewish tradition holds that, of course, it was this beautiful plateau-type top mountain experience. And then being cast off the mountain was Adam and Eve essentially sinning, falling short of the glory of God. They're removed. Well, we have the whole Old Testament trying to get back to that mountain. You go to Mount Sinai, Moses receives the law. And then, of course, they established Jerusalem, Mount Moriah. Most people have not considered that that's the same place that Abraham offered Isaac as a sacrifice in Genesis 22. So the same Temple Mount that Jesus goes to, Abraham, in that same location, roughly, sacrificed Isaac. Now, I was sharing with Revelation study. Can you imagine when we get to heaven and we find out these elements align perfectly? Can you imagine when you get to heaven and you find out the same place that Jesus was crucified would be potentially the same place that Abraham offered Isaac? So being cast off the mountain, you say, well, what do we do? Well, we've spent all of humanity trying to get back into a right relationship with God, but I shared with you that we're held back by that proverbial wall. Now, that sermon is truly an important one because most of us think of getting back to God through the hoops we have to jump through. And my offer on that sermon was, is it really the wall that God has designed, or is it the wall that you continue to hold up against him? So most of us say, well, I want a right relationship with God. And God says, well, then let down the pride. Let down your ego. Let down your addictions and your sin. And we say, well, God, I want you to love me in spite of that. And God says, I do, but you can't just want that. You have to bring down that wall to your heart. Revelation 3:20, yea, I stand at the door and knock. If I'm at this gate in your life, will you open it up? Will you let me in? Will you let me permeate your soul? And then I share with you, once you say, yes, I will let you, we talked about the mikvah bath. I don't know if anybody got the chance to come over here for this, but this baptismal is one to go in to be cleansed. I, of course, would encourage you to just come over here and you can just sort of wash your hands with it and remind yourself. If you're Catholic, you're like, it's too much Catholic. You know, you go in and get the anointing water and you walk up and you do I got to do it right. I know you think that's crazy. Now, what I'm offering is the mikvah bath used to be outside the temple, and you purify so you could go into the temple. Well, once you accept Jesus Christ, you let the walls down, you ask for the forgiveness of sins, you go and have a believer's baptism where essentially you're looking to the world and saying, it's not a physical cleansing, it's a spiritual cleansing. I will let Jesus be Lord of my life. Now, here's where it becomes communal. It becomes public for people to see. And so, of course, in our church tradition, we don't have it as a purification to come in to meet God. You come in, you get right in God's grace, and then you have a baptism. But the reason you could wash your hands in it as well, that's not beyond when Jesus says, you know, I've already washed you, but I'm going to wash your feet. Now, most of you don't want a feet washing ceremony, but if you did, it's not caught me. You could go wash your hands. That'd be typical today to just sort of say, God, I'm coming, I'm preparing for worship, and I want to be fully prepared and ready for what you're going to speak to me today. So washed by the waters, cleansed by the grace, because we are willing to confess our sins. We don't have to confess them outright to everybody. Now, I shared this about Bob last week, and you all looked at Faye because I said Bob Smalley. I meant to say Bob Wright, and I feel bad because they probably looked at Faye and thought, he was married? Like, no, it was not Bob Smalley. It was Bob Wright. And then, of course, Darlene went through her health issues and passed away. And then Bob was the one who was a deacon who shared openly, one of the first confessional openly. And it was just so beautiful because he, as a deacon of the church, was sharing from his heart. We're supposed to be the leaders of the church, and yet he was willing to humble himself and say, I'm really struggling, and having the opportunity to pray over him. That, to me, was washing his hands. And as a church, we want to continue to do both. We want the baptismal waters for you to have a public profession of your faith as a part of our church or a part of your relationship with Jesus Christ. And then we want a continuous washing, maybe not literally, but figuratively, and that is our confessional spirit in worship. Today I want to go into the courts. Believe it or not, we haven't gone into the temple yet, and now we do. We're going to spend the next few weeks going deeper into the recesses of the temple. Now, the temple had a setup. You could probably use our church visual very simply. The temple had the Gentile court. The Gentile court might be the fellowship hall, might be the foyer. It was outside of the formal religious practices of religious worship. Now, that didn't mean that they couldn't worship. There was practice, there were songs, there were activities, but in the Gentile court, there was an outer courtyard for non-Jews. And we do this as a church, right? Our fellowship hall, we allow organizations, groups to use it. We've certainly allowed it for the daycare. We've made space for our community partners. But then in the temple, you would enter into the actual temple, and when you came in, you'd enter into the court of women. Now, it's a little misleading because it was both for men and women, but this is where only the Jews were allowed to come in. Now we're finally getting to the space that was this holy space of worship for the Jewish people. And just like coming into the sanctuary, you know the doors of separation. You know when you come in, you've entered something a little bit different, something that's supposed to be a little bit more reverent, a little bit more of your focus. Somebody asked me about turning the lights down. We had a real challenge of people greeting and talking for so long at the start of church. We just thought, let's turn the lights down when we get into the music that starts the service. I appreciate Dylan starting that with a prayer now. And you kind of know, okay, hey, if I'm still out in the foyer, I'm having a different conversation than when I enter in those doors and I feel like I've entered what would be at the temple, the court of women. And you'd have worship, people would be playing songs out there. There'd be some, just like coming in here, you hear the music in the back. You may not be fully into worship yet. The offering, temple, court of women, had a place to give offerings, likely where Jesus saw the widow's mite being offered. And then you could come a little bit closer and think of like the first area of worship in our own sanctuary. They call it the court of Israel. Now, this is where, sorry ladies, only the men could go. And part of that was that was a patriarchal culture they went into on behalf of their families, but they would take in the sacrifices, and inside the tent of the court of Israel, you'd have the court of priests. And the priests would be the ones with the altar, which we'll talk about next week. You would go and you'd prepare a sacrifice for your family. But notice what I just portrayed. You would do it in front of others. Even as you got closer to God, the Holy of Holies, right? You'd have the holy place, and we'd have Holy of Holies. And in the court of priests, they prepare you and your family for coming into that intimate space with God. Just like our church, that might be our space for communion, our prayer altar. Hopefully, when you come to kneel at the altar for prayer, you're in a different spiritual space than you were when you were eating a donut in the foyer. Well, how does that transition work? And why does it matter? I want to offer you this morning, when you enter the temple in Jesus' day and in the church today, you are asking, you don't even know it this morning, but you are asking, if you're doing it right, for one transaction. At the heart of all of it, it all funnels down to this one simple event that you hope to encounter. Now, you may not, when I start off and tell you what this is, because you're going to be like, I really didn't want that. Because I know you came in this morning, you're like, well, I wanted a little bit of worship. I wanted some prayer. I wanted some fellowship. I wanted to connect. If you truly come into worship in the temple and as it is in the life of Jesus, you are actually coming into his presence for judgment. The temple, and even this place, at its core, offers judgment. Now, you may think that's a little bit crazy, but let me share with you a cool parallel, and you can look this up later. I have the photo. We'll use it next week in a little more detail. Did you know that the way you set up the temple or the tabernacle is almost identical to a courtroom? Now, think about that for a second. You walk into a courtroom, you have the Gentile court, you have the place where you can observe, right? You get to walk in, you get to sit down, you get to see all the happenings. But then, has anybody noticed the railing you can't walk past? On the other side of the railing are the really important people. Who's on the other side? Yeah, those lawyers, those liars. Liars? Oh, I mean lawyers. The lawyers are on the other side. And then there's also space for the jury. And then as you go through, we're just using the sanctuary in the same space, right? You all sit and watch. Then there's that railing. If you came through the railing, you're a part of that court practice. You're one of them. And then in that, you're in front of a jury of your peers, the court of Israel, right? We're watching. We're observing. And then what are the priests, what are they standing in front of? Well, the judge on the bench is standing in front or presiding for the law. Like, that is incredibly similar, isn't it? And the priests are standing before these sacrifices, what's being offered, to give judgment on behalf of the lawgiver. And I think we lose sight of that as Christians because we don't think of church as a place of judgment. And I know I'm going to make you a little uncomfortable for a few minutes, but we're going to get to the place where offering that visual, that mindset, actually is more freeing than you realize. So just like a courtroom, not everyone has the same access. Everyone understands one basic reality. The closer you move to the judge, the more serious things become. Courts, they're places where truth is examined, where accusations are weighed, where verdicts are delivered. Does that sound like temple sacrifice? It functioned ideally the same way. The temple is a courtroom, not just a place of worship, but this architecture alone communicated a movement towards judgment. The public gallery, anyone could watch what was going on, or they'd learn a second after it all transpired what happened. I think of this as some of us might feel this way. Are we still in the Gentile court? We observe. We're on the peripherals. We haven't joined the church, for example, in membership, and we're like, well, I don't know if I want to have to go through those hoops. I have to tease you guys. I always laugh when people say that. Baptists are the easiest at this. You know, you've been to Catholics, ask yourself what it means to join their church. If you've been to Lutherans, ask what it means to join their church. Been to Presbyterians, ask what it means to join. Everybody has some sort of relative, like what is stopping you from entering from the Gentile court into that space? Now, you set the terms. Usually we want to set the terms by our past. But when you walk in, you go, I can't do that. Ultimately, it is that space in which I entered. What is the practice? You didn't get the choice to decide if you were making the sacrifice and not going to receive judgment. And that's what people in the Gentile court could say. Well, I don't want to be judged, so I'm not sure I want to go into that space. I'll just watch. We watch religion like a game in the stands. We attend church, we listen to sermons, but do you step into that place of deep examination, both by your peers and by God? Now, if you did, you might find yourself in the court of women's. Let's consider this the jury box. Now you come in, and the peers are watching you. Everybody's watching, just like they watch the widow's mite. Are you giving? Are you tithing? Are you serving? Are you volunteering? But it does represent the gathered community of Israel. You don't have a relationship with Jesus outside of that community, that collective witness. You can't take communion at home, for example. When Jesus said, do this in remembrance of me, he said, do this collectively together. You do this, not an individual, but you, the church. Faith is communal. We share this beautiful witness together. When you came this morning, believe it or not, even if you feel like you're still in the Gentile court or you're in the women's court or you keep trying to get into a deeper relationship, the fact that you're here significantly tells the world God's church still matters. And then you come a little closer. This is the attorney's space. The court of Israel was very intentional about how the sacrifices went to the altar, what family was presenting what sacrifice. It begins to represent the legal representatives in a courtroom. The priests, they mediate between God and the people, and those who are close to that altar, juxtapositioning their sacrifice in and before or after somebody else's sacrifice, knowing full well when it comes to their moment that the blood is shed, sacrifice offered, judgment on them. I remember I've been called into a courtroom several times on people's behalfs. I remember going through this same situation. I had a young man who was accused of a terrible crime, but being a juvenile, the crime was an assault on another person, and I was asked to go in. And I remember meeting with him and his grandma and their attorney in the back. We went through some leaflets of papers and kind of reviewed what was a concern. We actually pointed something out that was a flaw. He really was being set up. He misbehaved, but it wasn't illegal as it was being presented. But I remember still feeling so much tension for him that the decision was going to be made from the judge here momentarily. And to have that on display for anybody who was in the courtroom. And you walk into that Gentile courtroom, and we sit down and you wait, and then you get to pass through that little gate space and go up. Now, he had to be on one side with his attorney, and then, of course, the state, the prosecuting attorney on the other table. And then I was called up, and you go up into the witness. And it is the most intimidating thing to sit there and realize, this statement. Do you profess to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. And the judge overseeing this, getting so close to that space, feeling the overwhelming presence of right versus wrong, justice and judgment is going to be decided. And this young man that I stare across from that witness stand to the individual, knowing his life weighs in the balance. If you came here this morning and you don't feel that that is a part of your place in worship and God's judgment, you're still in the peripherals. And here's why it's really important. Because without judgment, you don't receive grace. Without confession of sin and acknowledgement of being the guilty party, you can't get the judgment and the verdict that gives you to His grace. Any of you ever feel like you live with the punishment of things that you know that other people don't know? We said this in our men's ministry yesterday at my table. We were discussing about accountability with men. And one of the things we discussed is it's hard to want to be accountable because you don't want to tell people you're not perfect. Other men don't want to say, I really am struggling, or I could really use some help with. We just kind of have that pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I told the men yesterday, I said, that's not actually God's plan. I used the metaphor of sled dogs. Believe it or not, if we put all of our weight onto one sled and we pull in unison together and we help each other out, we'll go farther together. But you try to do it on your own, and you're going to find yourself freezing in the wilderness. But to do that is to say, I need your help, to ask for it. And one of the things when we said that is we said, but I just don't like people to know that I can't do it. And I'm going to give you freedom. You ready for this? Once you admit what you can't do, nobody can hold it over you anymore. You're free from it. That's what we're so afraid of being judged. We're missing the opportunity that if it's from the true and righteous judge who then decides the verdict to give us grace and freedom, even in spite of our failures, our shortcomings. Once you've put it out there, you've received the judgment, there's nothing anybody else can do about it. I do this all the time. My self-deprecation knows no bounds. I know I can't remember people's names. I can't remember anything. If I tried to pretend that I could remember things, I'd be living a lie, and I'd have to keep trying to figure that out. Trevor, God love him, he loves making fun of me because I can't do plumbing. He's right. And you know what the most powerful freedom is from being able to tell Trevor I can't do plumbing? He does it all. Did you say he can or cannot? He can. We did find some revelation yesterday about that too. You're here this morning. If you really come into worship, at the heart of worship, you're asking God routinely, both a full baptism or the washing of hands. God, these are the things that are still part of my life that I struggle with. I accept your judgment of my shortcomings, of my failures, of my sin. Now, let me tell you how this is different. Remember, I told you about that young man. When the judge cast verdict and said, you're found not guilty, the freedom that came from that. This is past me. This is over. I'm not hiding from it. I'm not trying to avoid it. I came right into the courts like I was supposed to. I offered myself in that situation to be fully transparent about what happened. I was found not guilty. Freedom. For those of you here this morning, you're like, I don't want to face the judgment. It's going to be the judgment from the lawgiver. It's freedom. What is Jesus saying? The truth will set you free. This is this universal reality that we struggle. We are always going to be the accused, the guilty party. We imagine coming to church, all the activities that participate in church, all that you do that you participate with is an outpouring of your acceptance of being the accused, the guilty party, and then the verdict that came with it. Now, that's what you're going to ask. Who makes the verdict? You ready? Here's a really cool theological twist. Now, most people will say, well, Jesus, is he like my defense attorney? No. He's the worst defense attorney you could ask for. This is what Jesus would say if he's your defense attorney. Guilty, really bad, not good, sins a lot of mistakes, right here. This person, right here. I don't want that defense. No. What does John say? Moreover, John 5:22, the Father has entitled all judgment to the Son. He is sitting on the throne, the judgment throne, the bench, if you will. You come before the lawgiver, and you find Jesus is the one who's going to give you the judgment. But then this is what's really cool. What does he do? Even in a guilty verdict, you follow a guilty verdict with a consequence. What is the sentence? And the judge himself comes off the bench. He says, you know what? This is a consequence that even you can't bear alone. Jesus is both the judge and the scapegoat. He takes that burden from you. This is the shocking turn of events. What the priest could not do, even in making temple sacrifice. What you and I can't do by trying to follow all the right positions we're supposed to be in, so we never have to be the one that is the accused, when we know inevitably we are. For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And the evidence is read, the charges are undeniable, you expect the gavel to fall, and instead the judge says, your sentence has already been carried out by me. And that is the gospel. Don't be afraid of judgment. Welcome it, run to it, get to it, want for it, pray for it, accept it. Because when you do, Hebrews chapter 4 becomes in full view. Since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to what we profess. We have a high priest who's able to empathize with our weakness, who's been where we are. Let us approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. It's not arrogance. It's not denial. is confidence rooted in grace. If you're here this morning and you believe in God, the evidence of that is accepting the guilty verdict because you believe the grace that follows. If you don't really trust God, you can't confess, you can't share a guilty verdict because you're not sure that he's really, am I worthy of forgiveness? Am I really going to be forgiven? That is a measure of faith. Don't escape it. To not accept his judgment is to lack faith. You're to be in the Gentile court observing. You want to see what others do. Some of you are still in the court of the Israelites where you're watching upon other people, passing judgment on them, not realizing that you're next in line. You come before God, and what you offer as your sacrifice is your confession. Many people stay in the outer courts of faith. They observe, they participate culturally, they admire religion, but they never come all the way into the courtroom where their lives are actually laid before Christ. The gospel that calls us closer, closer to the bench, closer to the judge, also calls us closer to God's grace. So you're one of two people here this morning. If you're sitting in that jury pool because you know as a communal witness it's your responsibility to notice others, but you're doing it with judgment, then you're lacking the same attitude as Christ. You might be one of those barriers for people coming into this church. But if you're also sitting out there this morning and worship is only about the songs and only about a nice prayer and only about some cute fellowship and interactions with other people, I'm asking you, do you see it as an opportunity of freedom? And do you see that freedom coming through the judgment of Jesus Christ saying, I know you have sinned. I know every mistake you've made. And by you making that confession and coming before me, I grant you the freedom of grace.